Here in the middle Himalaya is prime Himalayan barbet habitat. This bird is found right across the Himalaya from the west to the east in these middle altitudes. And this nest hole behind me, which we refer to as the most important and prized piece of real estate in the Himalaya, has alternated between the Himalayan barbets and a local population of rock bees. And while the barbets nested in it 1 year and successfully reared a brood of chicks, the rock bees took over shortly after once their breeding season got over, and didn't allow the barbets to come back the next breeding season in spring when they wanted to once again breed there. One of my favorite stories centers around a nest cavity in the tree trunk of a Toon tree in Landour, a small hill station town in the western Himalayan state of Uttarakhand. I call this nest hole the most valuable piece of Himalayan real estate. I've been following this excavated nest hole cavity for 9 years now, and each breeding season brings with it a new story. In the first season of my study, a large group of Himalayan rock bees had possession of the nest hole. The following year, in the early spring, along came a pair of Himalayan barbets. They used their large heavy beaks to enlarge the opening of the tree cavity, shaped it into a perfect circle, and managed to oust the rock bees with the help of their large beaks. In an amazing turn of events, the rock bees claimed it back the following season once the barbets had abandoned it on successfully raising a brood within. However, a colony of wasps had somehow started eyeing it as well. Even as the rock bees took possession of the nest hole, the wasps kept a small army of sentinels hovering at the entrance, buzzing a few inches from the nest hole in the air, hoping to get a foothold into this prime residential abode. For a full 3 years, the wasps remained mid-air, hoping to claim possession of the real estate. The wasps would retain vigil throughout the daylight hours, and each time the wasps came close, the aggregate of bees at the entrance shook themselves in unison to give the effect of being larger and more intimidating than they really were, to keep up the pressure on the wasps and continue to stake out their own claim. The surprise twist came about when the tree itself started claiming the nest hole back by closing the entrance to the cavity with fresh growth of wood. With time, the hole closed entirely, thus jettisoning the rock bees from it, and when the cavity was less than the width of a bee, the bees gave up and exited their nest hole. At the end of the next winter season, along came the barbets again, and finding the opportunity, they drilled back into the tree trunk and claimed the cavity as their nest hole for the spring season ahead. The next year, before the barbets could come along and stake their claim, even earlier in the winter season, along came a pair of larger birds, the large, scaly-bellied green woodpecker. Now these woodpeckers can pack a punch when wood is the target, and so they busied themselves in further enlarging the diameter of the entrance to their new home and proceeded to lay their eggs in the cozy chamber inside. They successfully fledged a brood of 3 young woodpecker chicks, even as they were kept busy procuring food for the growing youngsters within, collecting grubs and larvae from rotting tree trunks which they brought back in their gizzards and throats, regurgitating into the hungry mouths of the chicks within. And when a feeding session is done, the chick being fed turns neatly around and delivers a fecal globule which the parent then takes gingerly in its beak so as not to puncture it and deposits it in some faraway place in the forest. This is done so that predators don't become aware of the presence of their chicks in the nest hole from fallen fecal matter below the tree. After all, yellow-throated martins, the light and efficient killers of the middle Himalaya, are always on the ready, able to read such signs and respond with a quick climb up a tree to investigate the nests of birds for a quick snack while on the move. Sikkim is one of the nicest little secrets of India. A tiny state adjacent to India's West Bengal state to the south, Nepal to the west, and Bhutan to the southeast. Sikkim contains a lovely swath of some of the finest Himalayan forests and is sparsely populated by simple and friendly people living as happy little isolated communities that stretch all the way into the Tibetan plateau beyond the high altitude lake of Guru Dongmar, which is one of the highest lakes in the world. Guru Dongmar itself is a tranquil aquamarine high altitude lake situated at over 17,000 feet altitude in Sikkim, close to the active border between India's state of Sikkim and Chinese control across the border with Tibet a few kilometers further. While shepherds graze their sheep in the bucolic environs of the high altitude meadows of the Tibetan plateau here, border tensions tend to simmer between India and China every once in a while. The drive from Chungthang to Guru Dongmar is one of my favorites. That apart, it makes for perhaps the fastest altitude change that is possible while driving anywhere in the world. While everyone speaks of the highest motorable passes in the world, which are situated at Khardung La and similar passes in the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir, this drive is truly something else. From a moderate altitude of 5,600 feet at Chungthang, I usually start the drive at 6 in the morning. By 12 noon, we are at 17,200 feet in a narrow stretch of the Tibetan plateau that is very much in Sikkim, but one that stretches out north onto the plateau, allowing India to flavor the wonders of the Tibetan plateau lands. While one starts the drive to the south of the Himalaya, this remarkable 6-hour drive takes one right through the greater Himalaya with high peaks of over 22,000 feet altitude on both sides. And then suddenly, in one great upheaval of geography and landscape, one finds oneself to the north of the Himalaya with the peaks far behind you. The landscape levels out around the eye into a pleasing flatland with little streams running wild, edelweiss and gentians profusely growing in all directions, and the cold winds of Tibet cooling your sunburnt face. The daytime heat can be intense when you're out in the open sun, and the nighttime chill even more intense as the winds pick up and the mountain breeze collides with the high altitude desert air. The peaks of Kanchenjunga and Chomyomo literally empty their glaciers out above the road, or so it seems. The Tista flows alongside. Even more cataclysmic than the geographical changes are the rapid changes in the biota of the valley of the Tista as one ascends. Every few hundred meters of ascent leads to a change in the bird life, plant life, and the animals around. The rhododendron shrubs become smaller and smaller, from trees near Chungthang to large bushes above Lachen and down to tiny shrubs further up the valley. Access to the lake of Guru Dongmar is only permitted to Indians who have obtained a special permit, and foreign nationals are not allowed to visit the region at all. Even for Indians, the army keeps a strict check on visitation given the harsh climate, the extreme altitude, and the low temperatures. Visitors must drive off the plateau by 1 p.m. at the latest to prevent breakdowns on the desolate apology of a road. Since there is only an indicative track that serves as a road, SUVs can wander off the path and break down in places where help is hard to reach. Needless to say, there is no mobile signal anywhere near. Among the many secret attractions of the Tibetan plateau at Guru Dongmar are a profusion of autumn flowering gentians and fields of star-shaped edelweiss. While the edelweiss may sell for a hefty price in euros in the European Alps, here they comprise of sheep fodder and mingle with the grass under one's feet. Meanwhile, Himalayan marmots gamble on the plateau lands but scurry for cover the moment they sense the presence of an outsider. Part mouse and part hare, marmots are a common sight in the high altitude deserts of the Himalaya. The Tista River emanates here, and from its humble beginnings higher up above the Guru Dongmar Plateau, it turns into quite a gushing torrent below Thangu and Lachen, heading through Chungthang and further south. It harbors perfect habitat for the rare white-breasted dipper that hunts along the river in order to feed its brood, hidden away under an overhanging rhododendron root. Higher up, around the high-altitude meadows, lie some of the finest valleys of high-altitude Himalayan rhododendrons, the dwarf and bush varieties. In the valley of Yumthang, one can see a high-altitude species of Aresima or snake plant. The Shingba Rhododendron Sanctuary is home to the rare yellow poppy, while the Mechanopsis horridula, or the blue poppy, can be seen growing in profusion along the modest beginnings of the Tista River.
I'm sitting in the Shingba Rhododendron Sanctuary in North Sikkim on the way to Yumthang, and this before me is the Himalayan yellow poppy as opposed to the blue poppy, Mechanopsis. And right here this is rhubarb, which is used eaten by local village folk, and they actually use the stem to turn into a soup and a vegetable.
While purple pedicularis prefer the moist bogs along the many streamlets that feed the Tista River here, such as at Yumthang, a wide open valley with prayer flags and hot springs. Arunachal Pradesh in India's northeast is little known on the international stage, and you are more likely to see the lions of the Serengeti or the tigers of Ranthambore on international television than a documentary film on the region. As a result, this lovely corner of India is little seen or known internationally, and the customs and beliefs of the many tribes that inhabit this largely mountainous region remain unique and unspoilt by modernity or urban Indian culture. As one of India's 8 northeastern states, it shares its border with Bhutan, Tibet, and Myanmar. But things are changing, and young Arunachalis now aspire to become part of the mainstream culture of India. People generally leave their homes open in Arunachal. As in neighboring Bhutan, crime and theft are virtually unknown, and one finds some of the simplest and most unpretentious and nice human beings in this simple land.